Day 5 of the war, it is widening and escalating. An Iranian warship was sunk today. American diplomatic missions are coming under attack. The US says Iran made an attempt on President Trump's life. At this point, the statements are as dramatic as the strikes. We'll bring you the very latest. Also, the top videos to sum up this war. How markets are bleeding, with investors in India losing 21 trillion rupees in just 3 days. Oil prices are shooting up. Will it cross $100 a barrel? How the Iranian regime is holding. Did Donald Trump underestimate Tehran? Plus the status of evacuations amid the continuous travel disruption. The phone call between Trump and Netanyahu that may have triggered this attack. And with European assets coming under fire, will it get drawn into the fighting? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Russia blames Ukraine for a gas tanker explosion off Libya. Moscow has accused Kiev of using naval drones to attack one of its carriers in the Mediterranean Sea. The strike caused the tanker to sink. If true, this would be a rare successful hit by Ukraine on Russia's shadow fleet. Donald Trump's 15% global tariff is likely to be rolled out this week, says US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Last month, the country's Supreme Court had struck down Trump's country-specific tariffs. Trump has now tapped a different law to impose the new duties. Nepal gets ready for polls tomorrow. It will be one of the most hotly contested elections since the end of the civil war in 2006. KP Sharma Oli, the Prime Minister who was ousted in protest last year, is looking to return to power. His main challenger is former Kathmandu Mayor Balendra Shah. In India, Nitish Kumar is likely to step down as Bihar's chief minister, say sources. Reports say that he could move to the Rajya Sabha, which is the upper house of parliament. Nitish Kumar is likely to file his nomination tomorrow. The 75-year-old leader has been Bihar's chief minister since 2015. China's political conclave begins. The event is called the Two Sessions. It will outline Beijing's annual growth target, the defense budget, as well as the roadmap for the next 5 years. This comes at a time when the Xi Jinping government is facing a sluggish domestic consumption and an aging population. And Myanmar's junta announces fuel rationing for private vehicles. Those with even numbers will be allowed to drive only on even dates and odd-numbered plates on odd dates. The new rules will come into effect from Saturday. Myanmar is heavily reliant on fuel imports. The junta has blamed the war in West Asia for this decision. It's day 5 and the war is still widening. Israel is striking new targets deep inside Iran. Meanwhile, Iran is hitting riskier locations in the Gulf. US diplomatic missions are on their radar. Multiple embassies and consulates have been hit, and these strikes have done the unthinkable. Iran is driving out American citizens from West Asia. Let's look at the latest strikes. Iran fired 3 missiles and 130 drones at the UAE. One of the drones targeted the US consulate in Dubai. You could see a plume of smoke rising from the building. This was not an isolated strike. US embassies in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait had also been hit, so Washington has decided to take a tough call. It is asking Americans in West Asia to leave the region immediately. Even Turkey may not be safe anymore. Despite having US bases, Iran had not attacked Turkey yet, but that could be changing. Today, Turkey downed an incoming missile from Iran. Some reports say the regime was perhaps trying to hit Cyprus, and that the missile veered off course. Either way, the risk is significant because Turkey is a member of the NATO alliance. An attack on them would trigger a collective response. Basically, it could draw in other NATO countries. Overnight, Iran also fired drones and missiles at Jerusalem. The interceptions lit up the night sky. The battle is also raging at sea. Iran claims it has completely shut down the Strait of Hormuz. We've told you about this before. The strait carries 20% of the global oil trade. Its closure has already led to soaring oil prices. Meanwhile, the US Navy is hunting Iranian warships. Today, a US submarine sank one of them near Sri Lanka. The ship was called IRIS Dana. It was sunk by a US torpedo in the Indian Ocean. Sri Lanka's military responded to this incident. They managed to rescue 32 sailors, but so far at least 80 have been confirmed dead. The US military also did a press conference today. They gave 3 important updates. 1, the US claims it will have complete control over Iran's skies in a few days. Number 2, they say Russia and China are non-factors in this war. And number 3, they claim larger attacks are yet to come.
The 2 most powerful air forces in the world will have complete control of Iranian skies, uncontested airspace. I hope all the folks watching understand what uncontested airspace and complete control means. And as President Trump said, more and larger waves are coming. We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. So our air defenses and that of our allies have plenty of runway. We can sustain this fight easily for as long as we need to.
What is your message to Iran's allies, namely Russia and China, who have called for an immediate end to hostilities?
I don't have a message for them, and they're not really a factor here. And our issue is not with them, it's with the nuclear ambitions of Iran.
The US is also making a strange claim. They say Iran was behind an assassination plot against Donald Trump. And the official who ordered that hit has now been killed. As usual, there is no evidence to back up this claim. Israel, too, is continuing its aerial attacks. They have begun striking targets deeper inside Iran. Targets like Isfahan, which is home to nuclear facilities. The Israelis have 2 sets of targets in Iran. The first are the regime power centers, like your security buildings, your command headquarters. The second set are the military sites, like air defenses and missile launch pads. Israeli jets have flown 700 plus sorties so far. They claim to have destroyed more than 150 ballistic missiles, plus more than 200 air defense systems. We're talking about a very expansive operation. Let me pull up the map for you. All these Iranian sites have been hit so far. All of these places have come under attack. More than 2,000 targets in more than a dozen cities. The capital, Tehran, has been pounded relentlessly. The holy city of Qom has been hit. So have cities like Natanz, Isfahan, and Shiraz. If you look at this map, there is a clear trend. Most of the targets are in central and western Iran, and this is by design. Israel and the US wanted to create an air corridor over Tehran, meaning they had to clear out the west. They needed a clear passage. The question is, what comes next? Israeli media says the strikes will continue for 1 or 2 weeks. These hits will likely focus on other locations. The US military talked about this. They want to target sites deeper into the country, basically in eastern Iran.
This progress has allowed CENTCOM to establish localized air superiority across the southern flank of the Iranian coast and penetrate their defenses with overwhelming precision and firepower. We will now begin to expand inland, striking progressively deeper into Iranian territory and creating additional freedom of maneuver for U.S. forces.
Clandestine work is also underway. Reports say the CIA and Mossad are reaching out to anti-regime groups like the Kurdish militants in northwest Iran and the Baloch in the southeast. The plan is to arm these groups and encourage them to fight the Iranian regime. But will it succeed? Well, the regime knows what the plan is. Today, the Iranian Guards fired missiles into Kurdish sites in neighboring Iraq. So the Iranian regime's message is quite simple. Don't even think about it. As of now, we are not hearing about rebellions or protests inside Iran. The regime will be hoping to keep it that way, and for that, leadership will be key. It's been almost 4 days since Ayatollah Khamenei's death was announced. His funeral was supposed to be held today, but at the last minute, the regime decided to postpone it. On paper, the reason they give is logistics. But who knows what's happening behind the scenes? Like we've said before, this is a war of math and attrition. Iranian missiles versus US air defenses. Washington claims the missile launches are already down from Saturday, almost 83% down in 5 days. That is the claim. For starters, we do not know if this is true. And even if it is true, the impact has not changed. Iran may be firing fewer missiles, but their drones are actually wreaking havoc across the Gulf. Either way, a quick de-escalation appears unlikely at this point. Both sides are digging in for the long run. The war began on Saturday. Today is Wednesday. We have been covering this for 5 days now, and if you watch the show every day, you know what's coming next. But if you don't, here's what we do. We filter the facts from the fiction. We pick the moments from the last 24 hours that actually matter. Because right now, confusion is becoming a weapon. So here are the top videos of the day today. What's happening in West Asia? We'll start with video number 1. It's from Lebanon. It's one of the many countries in West Asia that are under fire. Lebanon is home to the Hezbollah, a Shia militant group and a regional proxy of the Iranian regime. It's part of what Iran calls the axis of resistance. On Monday, Hezbollah joined the war. And since then, Israel has been bombing Lebanon. The Israeli forces have struck 250 targets in Lebanon. They've killed 31 people, and the numbers are only going up. The latest videos show Israeli strikes hitting the capital Beirut. Take a look. The next video is from Jordan. Jordan is a key regional ally of the US. Of course, it is also under attack. Missiles and drones have been flying over it, and most of them have been intercepted. Here you can see British warplanes shooting a drone over Jordan. Take a look. Speaking of missiles, how can we forget the US Navy? They have 2 aircraft carriers in the region. They also have guided missile destroyers. They're constantly firing missiles at Iran. And the CENTCOM, the US Central Command, has released videos showcasing their firepower. Next, we head to Pakistan. Pakistan is not part of West Asia, but it's very much part of the story. Pakistan has been witnessing widespread protests over the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. New visuals have emerged from this weekend. People tried to storm the US consulate in Karachi over the weekend. At least 22 people were killed. And the latest images show how security forces fired at these protesters. Some of them were covered in blood. They were fleeing the scene. I must warn you that these images are disturbing and viewer discretion is advised.
उठाओ इसको उठाओ इधर आओ छोड़ो इसको उठाओ उठाओ यार छोड़ो इसको डंडे को उठाओ इसको लेके जाओ.
Which brings us to video number 5. It is from Kuwait. Like we told you earlier, 3 US jets were downed in Kuwait. 3 F-15 fighter jets. The US said they were mistakenly shot down by Kuwait's defense forces. And now videos have emerged from the scene. They show the American pilots who were flying these jets. These pilots ejected just in time and landed in Kuwait. Some locals confronted them, others gave them aid, and soon they were allowed to go. Our next video is from Iran. There are huge protests across the country, and these are not anti-government protests for once. In fact, these are protests against the US and Israeli strikes. Thousands of people were seen in the city of Yasuj. They chanted, "We fight, we die, we will not accept humiliation." That's what these people are saying. And some even gathered in other parts of the country to mourn Ayatollah Khamenei. Our last videos tonight are from airports across the world. As you know, the airspace over West Asia is mostly closed. Only a limited number of flights are taking off, and that means travel chaos. West Asia is an important hub for travel between Europe, Africa and Asia. So flight disruption there has led to tens of thousands of travelers being stranded. The situation is not really improving. Most flights still remain cancelled. Very few airlines are flying, and even these are running limited flights. So if you have a booking, make sure you check it repeatedly and confirm the status of your flight before heading to the airport. There are many people who managed to fly out of West Asian cities. They were seen at airports having an emotional reunion with their families and friends. These are our top videos for today, but as the story develops, we will have more in the days ahead, pictures and stories that are verified, because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet, so make sure you don't add to it. Do verify everything you see and share. The bombs and missiles are falling in West Asia, but the damage is showing in global markets. Look at the numbers in India. Investors have lost a whopping 21.9 trillion rupees. That's almost 22 trillion rupees in just 3 days. That's the loss. And the free fall continued today. The Sensex is India's flagship stock index. It fell by another 1,100 points in today's trade. The Nifty is the broader benchmark. It lost 385 points. And it's not just the stock market that is taking a hit. India's currency is also under pressure, the Indian rupee. Today, the rupee fell past 92 to the dollar. It is the lowest level it has ever touched, 92.3. That was the lowest level. Today, it's a record low for the Indian rupee, the lowest ever. And we may not have seen the worst yet, because the war is only growing bigger. Investors around the world are nervous. Markets across Asia saw a retreat today. South Korea's Kospi dropped by 12%. 12% drop in a single day. This is South Korea's biggest single-day fall since 2008. And you remember what happened in 2008. That was the year when the global financial system fell apart. It collapsed after a bloodbath in the US stock market. Elsewhere in Asia, there are losses, but none as sharp as what we've seen in South Korea. Japan's Nikkei was down by almost 4% in today's trade. China's CSI 300 slipped by almost 1%. Taiwan Stock Exchange was down by over 4%. And of course, in West Asia, it is the same story. Dubai and Abu Dhabi are the Gulf's twin financial centers. They were closed for two days because of the conflict. Today, they reopened and almost immediately, they fell. The stocks fell. Dubai's index fell by 4.7%. Abu Dhabi's ADX dropped by 2%. And these are not routine corrections. The markets are absorbing the shock of the war. The US markets opened just a short while back. They're fluctuating between red and green. And West Asia, as you know, is critical to the global economy. It's a critical node. The bulk of the world's energy and trade moves through here. Key West Asian cities are also major financial hubs. We're talking about cities like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and Doha. They attract some of the world's biggest investors. When these cities witness instability, the impact is widespread. And the stock market reaction is merely reflecting that reality. Investors are dumping stocks and turning to gold. When the war began, gold prices surged to $5,400. That's for 1 ounce of gold. 1 ounce is about 30 grams. So $5,400 for 30 grams of gold. Since the initial spike, the prices have stabilized a bit. They've fallen by about 5%. Gold prices right now are hovering around $5,100. But that's hardly a meaningful fall because gold is trading 20% higher than it was at the start of the year. A 20% jump in the first 2 months. And in the coming days, prices could move up again. There is risk of a supply shortage from Dubai. Remember, Dubai is one of the world's most important hubs for the physical movement of gold. Last year, this city handled roughly 20% of all gold flows in the world. This includes the supply from Africa and Europe. They often transit through Dubai before ending up in Asian countries like India. But since this war began, gold shipments through Dubai have stalled. The cargo is not moving, and if the supply does not stabilize, prices will rise further. That's the nature of this war. The damage is not contained to the battlefield. It is moving through supply chains, it is showing up in stock markets, and it is hurting the wider global economy. As of now, all numbers are flashing red. Have you heard of the rope-a-dope? It was a strategy developed by Muhammad Ali, the boxer. He would absorb punches by leaning on the ropes. He would eat punch after punch from his rivals. Eventually, the other guy would tire out, and then Ali would unleash his furious combinations. Many experts say this is also Iran's strategy. Absorb as many of the American attacks as possible, exhaust their defenses and missiles, and then pound them relentlessly. The attacks from Iran so far have followed the same trajectory. Let me pull up the map for you. Look at Iran's targets. We'll go from west to east. We'll show you the assets that Iran has hit with drones and missiles. Starting with the island of Cyprus. In Cyprus, they hit a British base. In Israel, they hit cities like Tel Aviv, Beit Shemesh, and Beersheba. Also Jerusalem, it has been hit multiple times. In Jordan, at least 4 locations have been targeted: Amman, Azraq, Suwaida and Irbid. And in Iraq, the base in Erbil has been hit. Now we move to the Gulf states. In Saudi Arabia, the capital Riyadh has been hit. The US embassy in Riyadh was up in flames. Another target was the Aramco refinery on the Persian Gulf. It was hit by drones and had to be shut down. In Kuwait, multiple locations in the capital have been hit. The capital city is called Kuwait City. The targets include the US base and the US embassy there. In Bahrain, the capital Manama has been peppered. It is home to the headquarters of the US Navy's 5th Fleet. The base was among the first to be hit. Over in Qatar, at least 3 sites have been attacked. The capital Doha, which is home to America's Al Udeid Air Base, and 2 other industrial cities, Ras Laffan and Mesaid. These are home to Qatar's natural gas facilities. Both were targeted by Iranian drones. Now we come to the UAE. Iran has fired more than 165 missiles at the UAE. The targets include Abu Dhabi, Dubai and Ras Al Khaimah. In Dubai, some very significant sites have been hit, including the Burj Al Arab Hotel, Fairmont Hotel on Palm Jumeirah, the Dubai Airport and the Jebel Ali Seaport. In fact, Dubai has faced the worst of Iran's onslaught. And finally, you have Oman. An Iranian drone hit a fuel tank at the Dukm port. Remember, Oman was mediating the nuclear talks last week, talks between the US and Iran. So the attack on Oman came as a surprise to all. Now let's zoom out and see how expansive this map is. Iran's attacks are ranging hundreds of kilometers from as far as Cyprus to as close as Dubai. It shows the range and scale of Iran's missile and drone arsenal. And this was to be expected. You see, Iran does not have a modern air force. They do not even have a capable air defense system. What they do have is a missile arsenal. The regime invested heavily in ballistic missiles. They wanted to turn offense into defense. So what you're seeing right now is that plan in action. This is precisely what Iran wanted to do. They also warned the Americans about it. The former supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, said it in so many words. He said the next war would be a regional war, and it has indeed become a regional war. The question is, how much more damage can Iran do? Well, that depends on their remaining firepower. Iran says it has not fired its most lethal missiles yet. If true, this would be a repeat of last year. Last year in June, they fought a 12-day war. And even then, Iran saved its hypersonic missiles for later. First, they flooded Israeli air defenses with drones and smaller missiles, and then came the destructive wave. We're not sure if Iran is repeating that strategy, but if they are, the worst could be yet to come. Also, Iran could expand the targets of its strikes. For example, they could hit seawater desalination plants, and this would be serious. You see, the Gulf states do not have fresh water. They depend on plants that convert seawater to drinkable water. The UAE gets 42% of its water from desalination. For Kuwait, it is 90%. For Oman, it's 86%. And for Saudi Arabia, 70% of its water comes from these plants. So what happens if these desalination plants are destroyed? These cities could run out of drinking water. We could be looking at city-level evacuations. I'm sure American military planners are aware of this. It must have been factored into their planning, and yet they attacked. So did the US underestimate the Iranians? Did they underestimate the resilience of this regime? Donald Trump was hoping for a quick success. You remove the top leadership and others will fall in line. He was hoping for a repeat of Venezuela. Even yesterday, he talked about that model.
We have, Venezuela was so incredible because we did the attack and we kept government totally intact. And we have Delcy, who's been very good. We have the whole chain of command, and they've been, the relationship's been great. We've taken out 100 million barrels of oil already.
Was Trump hoping for that in Iran? Was he hoping for a repeat of Venezuela? If he was wrong. Iran's regime was prepared for this possibility. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei had already named possible successors. For all we know, there's already a new supreme leader. They just haven't announced it yet. Similarly, backups have been prepared for most senior positions. Not just one backup, but 4 of them. And regional commanders already have existing orders. They don't call up Tehran for each attack. They know exactly what they have to do. And again, this resilience should not come as a surprise. It stems from the regime's paranoia and ideology. They know that people inside and outside want to topple the regime. And that is why they have so many layers of backups. Ayatollah Khamenei was the face of this repressive regime, but he alone was not the regime. The regime is a complex web of Iranian guards, clerics, and politicians. Logic says you cannot topple them through airstrikes. You must either deploy soldiers on the ground or hope for an internal rebellion. And so far, neither has happened. All wars have casualties. Soldiers, civilians, cities, infrastructure, investments. You lose some or most of these things. This war has one more casualty, and that's oil. Oil is the biggest exporter of West Asia. It's the commodity that the global economy runs on. And oil prices are under tremendous pressure. Brent crude is the world's benchmark for oil prices. It has already crossed $80 a barrel. In just 1 week, prices have jumped by 15%. Yesterday, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz was at the White House in the presence of US President Trump. He expressed concern about the rising energy prices.
Yeah, sure. This is, of course, damaging our economies. This is true for the oil prices, and this is true for the gas prices as well. So that's the reason why we all hope that this war will come to an end as soon as possible. And we are hoping that the Israeli and the American army are doing the right things to bring this to an end and to have really a new government in place who is coming back to peace and freedom.
And what was Trump's response? The US president appeared to downplay the risk. He said the prices will come down when the fighting stops.
Most people feel, I'll tell you what, I have never had more compliments on something I did. People felt it's something that had to be done. So if we have a little high oil prices for a little while, but as soon as this ends, those prices are going to drop, I believe, lower than even before.
Well, they're still fighting, and the prices are only going up. So how expensive is oil set to become? Right now, it's more than $80 a barrel. Will it cross $100 a barrel? It's all that energy markets can seem to talk about. If oil touches 100, everything becomes more expensive, from petrol prices to actual physical goods. Anything that is grown, manufactured or imported will cost more. So oil at 100 won't be a milestone, it will be a warning sign. The question is, will it cross that threshold? There are 3 factors that will determine the price of oil going forward. Factor number 1 is transportation, whether supplies can move from the Strait of Hormuz or not. That will decide the price jump. The Strait of Hormuz is a critical waterway. More than 20% of the world's oil moves through this choke point, and Iran has shut this route. So tankers are not moving. Insurers are not ready to protect the ships that choose to go anyway. Traffic from the strait has fallen by 90%. And as we speak, at least 40 large tankers are stuck near the strait, 40 tankers. They're carrying about 2 million barrels of oil. They're waiting for the security situation to improve, to be allowed to pass. If the strait is not reopened for another week, global oil prices will go up. Countries like India are already exploring alternatives. India has a large exposure to this disruption. 40% of India's oil imports pass through this strait. So a sustained blockade will hurt India's supplies. And that's the first factor to determine global oil prices, the status of the Strait of Hormuz. The second factor is the safety of energy infrastructure. If oil facilities come under attack, prices will rise. And the risk is real. In the past 5 days, multiple oil facilities have already been targeted. Even today, Aramco's facilities in Saudi Arabia were hit. This was the second strike in days. Aramco is the world's largest oil company. It is a state-owned giant. Aramco has a facility called the Ras Tanura Complex. It is home to Saudi Arabia's largest domestic refinery. It was hit by a drone strike on Monday and then again today. So oil facilities are in the line of fire, and that's bad news for the oil markets. Factor number 3 is supply. What happens if supplies from West Asian countries dip, if their production dips? What are the alternatives? Can OPEC pump more oil? OPEC is a cartel of oil-producing countries. Can they step up to plug the gap? Will Russian crude flow more freely? Will the US fill the gap? As you can see, there are alternatives, but they won't be able to step up quickly enough. Take OPEC, for instance. It is the world's most powerful oil bloc. OPEC stands for Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The world's biggest oil suppliers are its members. OPEC works like a cartel. They have spare capacity. They can pump more oil, but they often hold back to keep prices up. Even now, OPEC has spare capacity, but deploying it will take time. What about the US? Washington is not adding new supply, but it is trying to move supply that already exists. US President Donald Trump issued a statement yesterday. He said he's ready to deploy the US military to escort tankers through the Gulf. The goal is to ensure delivery and stabilize prices. But if the fighting continues, this move may not be enough. Another big worry is the evacuation of people. 5 days into the war, tens of thousands of people remain stranded. Airspaces are partially or fully shut. There aren't enough flights to bring them home. When bookings do open, it's hard to get a ticket because the demand is simply too high. Even flight booking portals are struggling to handle the traffic. Many of them have crashed, so people are turning to buses and private cars, traveling to safer departure points like in Oman and Saudi Arabia. They were safer until recently, and they're hoping to catch a flight from there. Some countries have arranged escorts for their citizens. For the rest, it's a wait and watch in the middle of a war zone.
There is a war unfolding in West Asia, and in its shadow, people are stranded. Tourists, workers, families, stuck in airports with no flights out, booking 8-hour bus rides through the desert, paying $1,000 just to cross a border. The crisis began when the United States and Israel launched strikes against Iran. Almost immediately, airspace across the region started closing. Qatar shut its skies. Thousands of passengers were stranded at Doha Airport. They had not come to the Gulf to live through a war. They were passing through. Now they could not move. The United Arab Emirates, normally one of the world's busiest aviation hubs, began restricting departures. Dubai and Abu Dhabi together handle tens of thousands of passengers every single day. They sit at the crossroads of east-west air travel, along with Doha. Every long-haul route between Europe and Asia passes through here. When that airspace closes, the consequences ripple globally. Iran did not limit its strikes to Israel and United States forces. It launched missiles and drones across the region, hitting countries allied to Washington. United States embassies in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia came under direct fire. Washington then issued an urgent directive. Americans must leave more than a dozen countries in the region immediately. Other governments followed. The United Kingdom, Spain, Italy, and Germany all began evacuation operations. Germany chartered some flights, but here the scale of the problem is massive. There are thousands who are stranded. A few flights cannot solve that. Some airlines are flying again, but widespread cancellations are still the norm, with passengers struggling to book a seat. So people are finding their own way out, and the options are grim. Oman has emerged as the key escape corridor. It has suffered fewer strikes than its neighbors. Its airspace remains open. Flights to the rest of the world are still running from Muscat. Shuttle buses are now operating from Sharjah, just north of Dubai, all the way to Muscat. Travelers have to take at least an 8-hour ride through the desert. The buses do not operate all the time, so it is not a quick fix. Slovenia organized police-escorted buses for its own citizens. But for most nationalities, there is no government convoy waiting. There is no escort. Saudi Arabia is another route out, but overland journeys that used to take a couple of hours are now costing over $1,000. That is 5 times the normal economy airfare between the same two cities. How is India responding to the challenge? There are millions of Indian nationals living and working across the Gulf. The Indian diaspora is one of the largest in the entire region. Their remittances are critical to the Indian economy. Their safety is a priority for New Delhi. India's Ministry of External Affairs has moved quickly. It has set up a dedicated control room. Emergency contact numbers for Indian embassies across the region have been published. Indian citizens have been advised to stay in contact with their nearest mission, follow local security guidance, and monitor travel advisories as they are updated. India has run large-scale evacuations from conflict zones before. The machinery exists. The question is whether this crisis will escalate to the point where it needs to be deployed again. Because the signals are not reassuring. United States President Donald Trump initially said this conflict would last 4 to 5 weeks. He has since stepped back from that, framing it as a broader, open-ended engagement. The Gulf has long been a crossroads for the world. Right now, that is under fire, and the exits are not easy to find.
So some European countries are evacuating their citizens, but beyond that, what is Europe doing? What is it doing other than strongly condemning and monitoring? Like on most issues, they're divided. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz was in Washington yesterday. He was the first leader to meet Donald Trump after the war broke out, and as expected, he's on the same page as the United States. No criticism, no advice. This is what he said.
So we, as I said in Germany the last 2 days, we are supporting the United States and Israel to get rid of this terrible terrorist regime. And we are looking forward to a day after, and we have to talk about the strategy. What is following after this regime is away, and we have to strategize on this entire region.
France is playing a balancing act. On the one hand, President Emmanuel Macron has refused to support this war. He says it was conducted outside international law. But on the other hand, he is blaming Iran's regime for this.
The United States of America and Israel decided to launch military operations conducted outside international law, which we cannot approve of. The Islamic Republic of Iran bears primary responsibility for this situation. They have developed a dangerous nuclear program and unprecedented ballistic capabilities.
France has hundreds of soldiers in Gulf countries. They also have binding security agreements with a number of them, like Qatar, the UAE and Kuwait. So their safety is a key priority for France. President Macron has deployed Rafale jets to the UAE. As we speak, they're downing Iranian jets over the region. In addition, France is also sending its aircraft carrier to the Mediterranean. That's the nuclear-powered Charles de Gaulle. It is sailing from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean. Now, just to be clear, France is not joining the attacks on Iranian territory. Their focus is on defensive strikes, basically shooting down incoming Iranian projectiles. The UK is doing the same thing. Before the attack, the US wanted to use British military bases. But Prime Minister Keir Starmer rejected it. Now he has made a U-turn. The UK is allowing Trump to use their bases. In fact, British jets are also in action. Like France, they're shooting down Iranian drones over the region. And still, Trump is not happy. He mocked Prime Minister Keir Starmer yesterday. He said, "We are not dealing with Winston Churchill."
By the way, I'm not happy with the UK either. That island that you read about, the lease, okay, he made it for whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
The UK has not attacked targets inside Iran. Keir Starmer says he prefers a negotiated settlement with Iran. He has promised to not join the war.
Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom was not involved in the initial strikes on Iran by the US and Israel. That decision was deliberate. We believe that the best way forward for the region and for the world is a negotiated settlement. President Trump has expressed his disagreement with our decision not to get involved in the initial strikes. But it is my duty to judge what is in Britain's national interest. That is what I've done, and I stand by it. To be clear, the use of British bases is limited to the agreed defensive purposes. We are not joining the US and Israeli offensive strikes.
The European continent has 3 big powers, the UK, France and Germany. Each of them has a different policy here. Germany is backing the Americans and the Israelis. The UK is not joining the war, but not condemning it either. And France has offered subtle criticism. But here's the question. What if a French aircraft is hit by an Iranian drone? What if a British soldier is killed by the debris? Will these countries still remain in a defensive position then, or will they start hitting Iran? That's a key question to watch out for. At the same time, one country in Europe is pushing back hard at Trump, and that is Spain. Spain is a member of NATO and the European Union, yet they have refused to share their bases for this attack. And that has enraged Donald Trump. He is threatening to impose an embargo on Spain, basically no exports or imports.
Some of the European, like Spain, has been terrible. In fact, I told Scott to cut off all dealings with Spain. And now Spain actually said that we can't use their bases. And that's all right. We could use their base if we want. We could just fly in and use it. Nobody's going to tell us not to use it. But we don't have to. But they were unfriendly. And so I told him we don't want to. Spain has absolutely nothing that we need other than great people. They have great people.
A lot to unpack there. Trump is talking about a full embargo on Spain. That too just days after the US Supreme Court restricted the president's trade powers. Clearly no lessons have been learned. And secondly, Trump says he does not care what Spain thinks. Even if they refuse to share their bases, America will simply fly in. Sovereignty be damned. But Spain is not backing down. Their prime minister had a simple message for Trump. No to war.
We must learn from history and cannot play Russian roulette with the fate of millions of people. The powers involved in this conflict must immediately cease hostilities and commit to dialogue and diplomacy, because the question is not whether or not we are in favor of the Ayatollahs. No one is. Certainly not the Spanish people, and of course not the Spanish government either. The question, rather, is whether or not we are on the side of international law and therefore of peace. In short, the Spanish government's position can be summed up in 3 words: no to war.
That's a principled position from Spain. But what's the reason? The Spanish government has opposed foreign aggression, whether it was Russia against Ukraine or Israel against Lebanon or now America against Iran. So the position itself is consistent and not surprising. But there is a political angle too. This move could boost the position of the Spanish government. Donald Trump is deeply unpopular among the Spanish people, so standing up to Trump will boost the Prime Minister's ratings. It's a mix of principles and politics. No matter which side they support, Europe cannot be on the sidelines because they have major stakes in this region. The first is energy. Europe imports nearly all of its oil and gas, so if prices rise, the people will feel the pinch. And that's where the Gulf nations play a major role. After the Ukraine war, Europe reduced its gas imports from Russia. Instead, it turned to Qatar. But if Qatar cannot meet the demand, what will the Europeans do? Will they go back to the Russians again? That's the first concern. Secondly, the Gulf states have significant investments in Europe. Consider the UAE and France. The Emirates is investing up to $50 billion in French data centers. If these attacks continue, will those investments go ahead? And finally, the political concerns. European countries are deeply aligned with Israel. Even if they oppose this war, they will prefer an Israeli victory, because a weakened Israel is not in Europe's interest. As of now, these countries are playing a defensive role. If that changes, expect these divisions within the continent to explode. This war did not begin with a missile or a speech. It began with a phone call, a call between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Last week, on Monday, the Israeli Prime Minister called the US President. He told Trump about a rare opportunity. He told Trump about a meeting scheduled for Saturday morning when all of Iran's top leaders would be in the same room, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. That was the tip that Netanyahu gave, and Trump decided to act on it. This is according to a new report by Axios. It details what happened in the war room in the run-up to the attack on Iran. Our next report has more.
What happened behind the scenes last week wasn't sudden. It was building for months. But it all came down to one phone call. Last Monday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu picked up the phone. On the other end was Donald Trump. Netanyahu delivered a bombshell. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and his top advisors would all be in the same room in Tehran on Saturday morning. One location, one meeting, one opportunity. If they struck then, they could take out the entire leadership in a single blow. That was the tip. And according to Axios, Donald Trump acted on it. The call to strike Khamenei, made from the White House Situation Room, is what set the war in motion. You see, Trump was already leaning toward hitting Iran. The debate inside Washington wasn't if, it was when. And suddenly, intelligence lands on his desk, saying the most powerful man in Iran will be exposed. Targets like that don't come twice. Trump didn't just take Israel's word for it. He ordered the CIA to double-check the intelligence. The agency confirmed it. By Thursday, officials were confident the Iranian leadership would be together. Meanwhile, something else was happening. While one side of the administration was coordinating military plans with Israel, another side was still trying diplomacy. Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law Jared Kushner were in Geneva talking to Iranian officials. There were hours of negotiations with both sides going back and forth. When the US team called Trump, their message was blunt. It's going nowhere. No deal or breakthrough. That's when Trump took the call. On Friday afternoon, 3:38 p.m. Eastern Time, Trump gave the final order. 11 hours later, bombs fell on Tehran. Ayatollah Khamenei was killed. Now, while this may sound impulsive, it was actually months in the making. According to officials, Trump and Netanyahu had spoken 15 times in 2 months. The original plan was reportedly for late March or early April, giving time to build public support. But Netanyahu pushed to move faster. Why? Because this was a rare opening. However, that means the White House could not prepare the public for war. Why? Because they didn't want to spook Khamenei. If Iran's leadership suspected something, they could disappear underground. So Trump deliberately avoided hyping Iran during his State of the Union. The result? When the bombs fell, many Americans were caught off guard. As Iran retaliated across the Gulf, the State Department scrambled to evacuate over 1,500 US citizens. Critics now argue, was America dragged in? Secretary of State Marco Rubio insists no. He says it was always going to happen. The only question was timing. Trump himself says he wasn't pushed.
Based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed.
So what really happened? Here's the clearest way to understand it. 2 tracks were running at the same time. Track 1, diplomacy. Track 2, military planning. Trump was watching both. When diplomacy collapsed and the intelligence window opened, the decision snapped into place. Because wars don't just start with grand speeches. Sometimes they start with a tip and a president deciding the moment has come.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Today, India celebrated Holi, the festival of colours. It's one of India's biggest festivals. Millions smear family and friends with colour. They prepare special food, sing and dance, and mark the start of spring in India. We're leaving you with these images. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.